Bright Duty. Every student matters.
Let us talk about density. Now, what is exactly meant by density? Density, as we must have read and understood, density is basically defined as the mass of a substance per unit volume. Now, what do we mean by saying mass per unit volume? That means how much mass of that particular substance, how much matter of that particular substance can be embedded or put in a particular specified volume. And that is how we define density, and we relate and we say that this is particularly denser or this is a bit less denser and it is having more density or less density. It all depends on how much mass we can put of a particular substance. Let us take an example. If we take a simple container and we try to put water into it, just up to the brim, up to the edge, we can measure the amount of water that can be put in that, fine, and then we try putting iron pieces into it. Now, if we want to fill the same container with iron pieces, we will observe that now that particular container becomes much more heavier. Why is it so? It is so because of the densities of iron and water. Iron is more dense than water. I can say water is less dense than iron, right? Now, the density of water is basically 1000 kilogram per meter cube. This kilogram per meter cube is the SI unit of density, right? Because mass is in kilograms and the volume is in cubic meters or the meter cube. So, we can say that the density, the SI unit of density is kilogram per meter cube or kilogram per cubic meter, right? The density of water is 1000 kilogram per meter cube. That means if I take a container of 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter, I can put 1000 kilograms of water in it. Whereas the density of iron is much more. It is approximately 7800 kilogram per meter cube. That means the container of 1 by 1 by 1 in which we are putting 1000 kilogram of water, if we try putting iron, it will be 7800. Why? Because it is much more heavier, it is much more denser. And of that of gold is even high, that is approximately 19,300 kilogram per meter cube, right? So, the density of every particular given substance is different and is fixed under normal circumstances. So, that is why we say that this density is basically a characteristic property of any particular substance, and this density is used to differentiate between substances. Got it? Now, if I need to take a smaller unit, then I can also relate it in terms of gram per centimeter cube, right? I have taken a lower unit of mass as well as a smaller unit of volume, and then the density of water is 1 gram per centimeter cube. Got it? Fine. So, this you need to remember that the density of water is 1 gram per centimeter cube or 1000 kilogram per meter cube, right? Now, taking water as a standard, we compare the different substances and we compare the densities of those substances in comparison to water, and that particular relation is known as relative density. Now, as the name in itself suggests that it is the density of a particular substance in relation to water. So, when we compare the density of any substance with water, then we say that that is relative density. Now, how to calculate this relative density? Relative density can be calculated by a simple formula, that is the density of the substance of which we are calculating the relative density divided by the density of water. Got it? So density of substance divided by density of water. Now the density's SI unit, we know that it is kilogram per meter cube. Similarly, the density of water's SI unit will also be kilogram per meter cube. Having the same units in the numerator and denominator will be cancelled out, and that is why, very importantly, relative density has no unit of its own. It is just expressed in numbers or fractions. Right? Fine. So this is relative density. Fine. Now, very important thing that we need to remember is, in the previous topic we have studied about the buoyant force. Fine. That any liquid like water or any liquid, it exerts an upward thrust or upward force on a particular object which is dipped into it. Fine. Now the water has got a particular density that we have just seen. Fine. And if any particular substance is put or immersed in water which is denser than that of water, that means if the density of any substance is greater or more than the density of water, then in that case it will mean that it is a heavier object and it will sink in water. Right? And vice versa, if the density of that substance is lesser as compared to the density of water, then in that case it is lighter than water, and that is why it will float on the surface of water. This is the case when we see the cork or the wood or even ice. Ice is made up of water only, but when it is converted into solid form, its density decreases. Right? Because of which now ice floats on the surface of water. So this is asked in the examination also, why ice floats on the surface of water. The answer is because ice has got less density as compared to water. That is why it floats on the surface of water. Right? Now, one thing importantly that we need to relate is, we are talking about relative density. Right? We know that the density of water is 1000 kilogram per meter cube. Fine. Let us take any particular substance, right, hypothetically, which has got the same density as that of water. And if the density of that substance is also 1000 kilogram per meter cube, that means now the relative density of that substance is 1. So whenever the relative density is 1, that means the substance is having equal density as that of water. Now let us take the second case. Now in this case, we are going to calculate the relative density of a substance whose density is greater than that of water. Now the density of water, as we have already seen, it is 1000 kilogram per meter cube. Let us take a substance whose density is more than that of water. Let it be 1200 kilogram per meter cube. Cancelling this out, I will be left with the answer 1.2. So any substance having a relative density greater than 1 means that it is heavier than water. Let us take the third scenario when we are calculating the relative density of a substance. Let it be substance number 1, substance number 2, substance number 3. The density of water, as we have seen, is 1000 kilogram per meter cube. And now let us say we take a substance whose density is lesser than that. Let it be 600 kilogram per meter cube. Now cancelling it out, I get the answer to be 0.6. So if the relative density of a substance is less than 1, it shows that it is lighter than that of water. Right? So simply we can relate that any substance having density more than 1, relative density more than 1, that means it is heavier, and when it is immersed in water, it will sink in water. And on the contrary, if the relative density of a substance is less than 1, in that case, it means it is lighter than water, and when it is immersed in water, it will float on the surface of water. Clear to all? Fine? Good. So this is basically the relative density of the substance. The density and relative density, both the concepts are clear to you? Good.